Some folks say you have to choose the right size carburetor for your engine, while others say, doesn't matter how big the carburetor is. That's a myth that you can't put too big of a carburetor on. Well, we're going to find out today. I get the line of thinking from both sides, but to be very honest with you, I always choose the right carburetor for the right situation. There's not one universal carburetor. There's not one universal size. There's not one universal brand or type that's best for an application. The application will dictate what type of carburetor it needs. Now, obviously, right now I'm playing a lot with street stuff, so that's what I've been concentrating on. When the Chevelle's done, we'll get into some aggressive, more driving, or certainly a far more aggressive engine, and it's going to need a different carburetor. I wouldn't run an edelbrock, this style of carburetor, on what I'm going to use it for. But for some reason, folks just love to argue about CFM size, that if you put too small a carburetor on, you're going to lose all your power, you'll lose all your top end. You may be right. And same goes for the opposite side. Well, if you got too big of a carburetor on, you can tune it. It's no big deal. Let's take a look at some of the details of that, and then we're going to go out to the GMC truck and we're going to actually put it to a test, monitor AFR, and see how the carburetor reacts on that situation. So for whatever reason, these things don't enter in the argument, but are things to consider when you're thinking about what size carburetor to put on your engine. Velocity of the air going through here is the key, because if you don't have the right velocity for the type of carburetor or the type of booster that's in there, it is not going to flow fuel correctly. And in that case, a lot of times that volume of air that's going through the carburetor isn't enough to pull the fuel through the booster properly and atomize the air correctly, so as it gets down in the engine, it continues to go follow the path through the intake and the cylinder head and gets to where it needs to go. But it all starts with the speed of the air coming through there, because that's how the boosters work. You have the Bernoulli principle. It talks about how that low pressure area works and how it pulls air through a restriction, a venturi at this point, and how a booster acts within there, and how that low area of pressure underneath the booster draws fuel. And if you don't have enough airspeed, you're not going to do that. So you have to take into consideration engine size and volumetric efficiency of that engine to understand what size carburetor you need to use. But I want you to remember that as we test this, that volume of air going through here and airspeed is critical for pulling the right amount of fuel through those boosters. Now, a lot of instances, there's two things that are pretty universally true as far as I've seen on the applications I've worked on for the last 35 years of doing this. If you put too big of a carburetor on a smaller motor, it tends to run lean because the engine moves a lot less air through the venturis. Now, that's not universally the case. It's just a very general statement. Sometimes you get the exact opposite. Depends on the type of booster, how it's configured in there, what the carburetor was built for. You can go on any retailer's website and search carburetor, and there's not two options on there, or one or five. There's hundreds of different options because of the way they're sized and configured on the booster and the secondary, and how they flow air through it to get it to meter the proper amount of fuel for the size and for the application that they generally try to fit that size carburetor into. So when you run a really small engine and you're not flowing the volume of air you need through there, it will be an issue on how the carburetor affects. Now, it also comes back to the idle circuit as well. If you have a high vacuum, small cubic inch engine, but a large carburetor, a lot of times the idle might be really, really rich, because even though that vacuum and that mixture is being pulled through the mixture screws, that fuel still has to travel through the jet, through the booster, and then down into that idle passage where it pulls through and pulls fuel into the engine. This is an 800 CFM AVS2 carburetor. It's the largest one Edelbrock makes in that Performer or AVS series carburetor. Currently, right now, the GMC has a 650 CFM AVS2 on there. And to be very honest with you, that may be just a touch too large. Given the RPM that I operate that truck at, it doesn't go to 6,000 RPM very often. It's very infrequent, actually. 650 is probably just a touch too big, but I want the AVS2 on there. I have run the 500 on there. It does tune very well. It does drive very well. It does meter fuel very well. So you can make the argument either way. But clearly the 800 CFM carburetor is going to be a very big carburetor on that engine. You've heard me talk about this dozens and dozens of times over all the hundreds of videos that I've done. Timing is the most critical support element for a carburetor, and a lot of times the timing is what's off versus a carburetor issue. When folks say, hey, I'm having an off idle stumble, or I can't get it to drive or cruise right, or wide open throttle, whatever the case may be, timing cures a lot of things within an engine. So I will tell you that right now, currently, the GMC is sitting at about 16 degrees before top dead center. I'm a little lower here in elevation. I'm not about maybe 200-300 feet above sea level, and it likes it there. And obviously the higher you go up in elevation, the more timing you'll need to add. So don't think that you can come in with 4 degrees or 6 degrees before top dead center and think you're going to be okay. In most instances, it's not enough timing. So make sure you've got enough timing in the engine. Now, because this is an edelbrock carburetor, we will use the edelbrock tuning chart for it. Right now, it is set up with the factory configuration. This is the manual choke 1912 carburetor. So we will start with the base calibration. I don't want to do anything with it yet. I want to see how it runs right out of the box, knowing that we're going to have to make some adjustments to it, but we're going to see what direction we need to go. Now, I doubt, because we're at 16 degrees already, that I'm going to adjust and put any more timing in it, but we need to look at all of the little things. We need to look if there's any hot start issues, any drivability issues, any dead spots, any things that we need to try to tune out of there. Those are all acceptable because you can make those adjustments to timing or tuning to get it right. The problem will be is if we cannot tune out of it, and that's what we're going to test today. Is too big of a carburetor something that your engine cannot deal with? I've heard it said a dozen times. I've said it on this channel. You cannot tune CFM. If it's an 800 CFM carburetor, okay, great. It's going to be 800 CFM. It doesn't really care, no matter how much you talk about what the airspeed or volume is flowing through that carburetor, it still has that capability to do that. The boosters are designed for that volume of air. Even though you may be flowing more, that's what they're designed, and that's how they're designed to meter fuel. So that's what we're going to check out today. Let's go out to the truck and we'll talk a little bit more about it. Now, also remember with this, everything else, like we said a minute ago, is a big factor in this. You have to have the fuel system correctly. I always run a regulator on every carburetor I run because I want the ability to make that adjustment at the regulator to make sure that the carburetor is seeing exactly the amount of flow or pressure that I want it to see. Well, now that we got all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get the carburetor swapped out. We'll get the 800 CFM carburetor on here and we'll get it warmed up and check fluids and temperature, and we'll get running. All right, we got her fired up. She's warming up. Still just a little cold. Fuel pressure is a little low. We're going to leave it there just simply because I think it's going to help a little bit. But here's one interesting thing with the AFR. We're at 11.9 at idle. And I figured we'd be fat, so that's okay. We know how to adjust that. We'll just take some fuel out of it. We'll give it another minute or two to warm up, and then we'll try to take some fuel out. All right, took a little bit of fuel out of it, but you kind of see, I think, that it's kind of bouncing around a little bit. And I do believe that that's simply because that it's a high vacuum engine. We are pulling currently about 20 inches of vacuum, 21 if you're going to get technical. And I believe that's partially the reason why this is a little more difficult to adjust. It's not horrible by any stretch. I'm okay being at 14.0 on the idle. That's not that bad at all. I tend to be a little fatter on it, but That's just me. I like them a little bit more on the rich side, simply for how the carburetor moves when it gets going. It's always nicer to have a little bit more fuel, but 14.0 is fine. My issue is we're bouncing from 13.6, 13.5 up to 14, 14.5, and that swing is concerning. So not that it's a bad issue, but typically when I set this with the 650 or the 500 even, my AFR stays pretty consistent. So just something we're gonna have to take a look at. Drop the pressure down just a touch. And all right, no leaks, we're warmed up. Let's go take it for a drive, see what we do. See how we're bouncing around, holding steady at about 50. $12.5, $12.0. Roll into the fuel throttle a little bit more. Interesting. See how we get really lean? Then it goes fat. I do believe that that is the speed. Look how lean or fat it got down all the way down to 9 as we let off the throttle. I do believe it's because that the airspeed going through there is not able. Now we're cruising at 4.2, 4.4, somewhere in there, 40 miles per hour-ish. A little leaner than what I want, but as I watch the AFR, we are bouncing all over the place. The theory's proving correct. Not really a theory, I already knew it, but showing you the theory is proving correct. All right, let's see how she does from dead stop to. How fast she's going. Lost a little bit of that low end, throttle response, but it's off, but not quite sure how to tune that. So I'm gonna take some accelerator pump out of it, and then we'll turn around, get in the parking lot here and make a few adjustments on her. All right, I went down to the middle hole on the pump shot. The 800s are at the top hole on the edelbrock carburetor. But I think what we're gonna do is we still have the factory calibration rods and jets in there. Step-up springs are changed, so I believe they're opening when they're supposed to based on the vacuum drop. However, I may change those as well to kind of delay the opening a little bit and maybe see if that changes anything. But right now, I'm just kind of chasing which direction to go. We do know that when we get into an aggressive throttle that we do roll a little bit lean, which I don't like. And leaving the step-up springs in there should be the way to cure that, but maybe delaying when they come in, when there's enough airspeed going past that booster, will help. So we're gonna try it. Add a little bit more idle fuel into it, so we'll see how that works out. But all right. Let me answer a few questions. We are a little fatter than I want to be, so I think I'm going to do that. Let me go change the step-up spring, and then I think I'm going to... Let me change the rod and jet first and see if I can dial it down a little bit. We'll start there and then see if we take some fuel out of it that way. Cruising at 40 miles per hour, and we're lean, so it's hard to make a determination of what direction to go here. And that's, again, what I think I'm going to just struggle with when it comes to making tuning adjustments. It's got a little bit of a top end, issue, like maybe the AVS isn't opening at the right time. So do one adjustment at a time, but having the AFR certainly makes this a much easier deal, and it lets you see what's happening at the same time. Not horribly lean, but lean enough to tell me that it's not metering fuel properly. Step-up spring, that's where I think I'm going to start. We're about 16 inches of vacuum. And it's got kind of a stutter to it. I think that's a lean stutter. You notice it's bouncing up to 15. When I roll into it though, eventually it recovers. But did you notice that shot where it spiked all the way over? That's because the boosters aren't metering fuel correctly. And when I'm demanding it, accelerator pump is giving a little bit of a shot, not much at that RPM or that throttle position. Made a step-up spring change. I think that's where I'm going to start. Had the orange springs in it from the factory, went back to the silver springs. That should help a little bit on the Cruise AFR and potentially change a little bit of how it does, you know, right there off of, you know, off idle, wide open throttle that we were trying out. So we'll play with it a little bit, but I think the Cruise AFR is really where it's going to make its biggest impact. So I had to follow my own advice of don't make multiple changes at once. So I'd really love to make a jet change or a rod change and go to number 4, I think it was on the tuning chart. But yeah, we'll stick with the step-up spring change and see what happens. She's kind of difficult to nail down here. So step-up spring, Cruise AFR, 50 miles per hour, 53 at 14. I'd rather have it a little fatter than that, but it's interesting how we bounce around everywhere. Let me see if I can take put a little bit of fuel into it. That is way too rich at lean, which I keep fighting because it bounces all over the place. So I knew we'd have that problem at idle, but it seems to hunt quite a bit looking for its operating AFR at idle. Still all over the place. You know, we're 1700 RPM-ish on a lean condition. It's kind of got a lean hesitation stutter to it. We're just not flowing enough air that those boosters need. When we let off and we get into the idle and transition circuits, it's fat again. So not pulling fuel very happily right now. Just on and off. Now if it stayed at 13.5, 13.9, I'd be happy, but it's just cruising it in the mid and upper 14s is kind of rough. So back to the drawing board. Here's what I decided to do. I went ahead and decided to add some more fuel to the cruise mode. So base tune is where we were at. Silver step-up spring in it. Decided to go 1 step rich, which would be number 7. Turned out to be a rod change. And we'll see how it works out. All right, adding a little bit more cruise fuel. Seem to have tightened up that lean spot. I have to keep driving and see where it's at. About 1600 RPM, cruising at 52 miles per hour. And we're fat, but it's almost a little too rich. Went from one extreme to another. About 1900 RPM. Look how fat we are. 65 miles per hour, and we are dead fat. About 13 on the vacuum gauge. Very erratic is the trouble. They keep kind of bouncing all over the place with it. So, let me do that. Let me make a spring change, see if that can calm down that cruise RPM a little bit. All right. I think we're gonna go to the pink spring and do that. It's got the orange spring in there now, or excuse me, the silver spring in there. And I want to try that pink because I think maybe 7 might be the better way, or 14. So we'll see if it delays the opening just a little bit. And yeah, we'll try that. And then I think my next step after that is going to be air valve secondary. I think I'll try to slow that down a little bit. Maybe it'll help bring in the secondary fueling a little slower. All right, so we went to pink spring and vacuum at cruise here is about 18 inches of vacuum. Roll into it a little bit. That's where I believe I can make a change with the ABS. See how fat we go? I'm off the gas. Lots of vacuum. And that rolls into a lean condition. So I think we're going to continue to fight that. Let's see how it does when we roll into this higher mile per hour zone up here. Off the gas, peg, bridge. About 2,000 RPM. About 12, 13 inches of vacuum. Okay. Slowed the air valve down just a little bit. See if we can help delay that fuel a little bit. It's just everything we do, I seem to be fighting it. And again, I think I'm going to summarize this up a little bit. I'm going to keep trying to tune through this thing, but the problem is I still believe that that's the issue. This carburetor does not run as well as the 650 does. Not sure if you saw that, but when the AVS opened up, it certainly changed the fueling. RPM spiked. I think I'll have to look at the AFR on the replay to see where it's at, but you look now, we're back lean, or excuse me, rich. Let's see how it does in the cruise mode 65. About 1900 RPM again. Dead rich. Well, we're learning stuff. Guess that's all that matters. Here's where we stand with this thing. I've got about maybe 8.5 hours, 9 hours total today of working on this thing, trying to get it dialed in, and honestly, it's ran a little better than I suspected it would, but it has certainly been almost impossible to get to where it is drivable in a condition that is acceptable. What do I mean by acceptable? That's fairly simple. Needs to run well, needs to run well at all RPMs and all conditions, meaning idle, off idle, cruise, wide open throttle. All of those are key in making sure that you have a carburetor that is well adapted to what the engine that you're working on and in the condition that you're trying to drive it in. The issue with this carburetor has been every time we've tried to address one of those situations, it keeps jumping back and forth. So if we are lean or rich at idle and we try to lean it out or fatten it up, drive it, come back, work on other things, and then you're right back to working on cleaning up the idle again. It's pretty interesting, actually, just to see it on the AFR and again on the vacuum. And I mentioned this on another video here recently. I think it would be really good to see it TPS reading to see exactly where it's at, because I think that would help understand a little bit what's going on at what RPM and where the throttle position's at, because then it's a little bit easier to understand where the engine's operating at how much the throttle's open, and you can kind of factor things in there. But really watching the AFR was pretty enlightening, because it gave you a clear picture of when those events were occurring. What did we learn from all this? Well, I can tell you that if you were to ask me, would I ever run an 800 CFM carburetor on this engine in this configuration, the answer to that would be no. Far too difficult to dial in all those things, get it running right. Now, again, running into those conditions where you are super rich, super lean, long term, regardless of feelings on it, it does have detrimental effects on the engine. If you're continually contaminating the oil because it's a very rich condition, you break down the additive packages in there, and it doesn't protect the engine the way it's supposed to. Conversely, if it's lean all the time, then yeah, you're running into a condition where, you're running the engine hotter than what it should be, and wear is going to occur. Wear is going to occur more on a heavily rich and a heavily lean condition than over one where you've got a good mixture of fuel and air going through the engine, and it lubricates and flows through the system properly and keeps the heat down, keeps the wear down, and keeps the oil or the fuel from contaminating the engine oil and reducing its effectiveness. Now, just like anything else, did this engine, were we able to start it, drive it, run it, cruise it up and down the road? Yes. Did it do so effectively? Absolutely not. Again, very, very difficult, because there was conditions, again, where it was just so lean on one and then so rich on the other that it was impossible to correct them both. Where did we end up on the tuning chart? Well, I think the last one that I saw in the video, or the last one we did on the video, was maybe at 7. I ended up at 8. We went to 9, went to 10, went to 11, went to 8, trying to bounce back and forth, looking for, do we add more fuel, do we take more fuel away, all at the same time, fighting idle mixture and fighting transfer and how much fuel was being delivered. Pump shot we looked at. I think right now it's in the middle hole, but we tried it in all three just to try to find a good spot where we could make it work and continue to address those ranges: power mode, cruise mode, and idle. And every time we would make 1-to-1, it would either jump back extreme to one direction or the other, and as you tried to put it back, it just wouldn't go. And I think that old adage of, airspeed going through a carburetor, and that Bernoulli's principle that we mentioned really briefly at the beginning of this, how it meters the fuel through the boosters, is really the critical key here. That carburetor is designed to flow a lot of CFM and a lot of demand on the engine, and it's just not here on this one. So when you're in that condition, it's just not allowing the boosters to work and flow properly, no matter what you do with step-up springs, with rods and jets and accelerator pump, timing. I've tried everything, lowering fuel pressure, raising fuel pressure a little bit. In every instance, we were very, very crossed up in what we were trying to fix. So again, I think if you look at it from a completely ignorant standpoint, where if you don't have any data that you're looking at, being it, an AFR, vacuum gauge, RPM gauge, whatever it is you're working with to try to understand how the engine's reacting when you're making those tuning adjustments, you may look at it and go, well, it got a little bit better. It was able to do a little bit of a burnout, but then it would bog and hesitate, and then it would jump right back in when the AVS opened up on the secondary side and starting to add more fuel, but then we needed to take some away because it was too rich. We'd do that, we'd drop that down, and then all of a sudden you're looking at a condition where it's too lean. So every step of the way, it just fights you. And again, I think if this was a large cubic inch engine that moved a lot of volume of air, which again, small block, 355, not really designed to move the volume of air that's needed for this engine to, to get the boosters to work correctly. It just wasn't there. We could really look at this a couple of different ways. Again, like I said, did the engine start and run and do all those things? Yes, we were able to physically get the engine running and moving. Was it at its peak? Was it at its prime? Were we able to tune out some of those things? No, we weren't. And again, I think it just all boils down to how the fuel atomizes and how it draws it through a system that's designed for a lot more volume. We just aren't able to pull enough volume of air through there. And I think if we were out on a dyno where we could swap some headers out and look at EGT or O2, AFR and all that on each cylinder, that would be good. We could look at EGT as well. That would be helpful. TPS, that certainly would be helpful. How much flow is actually flowing through the carburetor? That would be a really good one, because then you could look at CFM of how much volume of air is being run through a 650, 500, or this 800. And then you'd know that the 800 is just not allowing, or the engine's not allowing enough air to move through the 800 to meter the carburetor properly. I think that's just really the simple answer to all this. Did it run? Sorta. Was it optimal? Absolutely not. Is this too big of a carburetor for this engine? Absolutely it is. Now, here's the flip side of that. I have a 950 CFM carburetor coming for the Chevelle. That should be here next week. I will do another video where I will put the 950 on here and see if it's any worse or about the same as this one. Maybe adding 150 more CFM versus this 800 will really show something much different in as far as how it drives. Got any questions on this one? Don't hesitate, leave them down below. I know there's folks out there that doesn't matter what data you show them, doesn't matter how you view it, how you tell them you've tuned, they will still never believe that you can put too big of a carburetor on an engine. I get that, I completely understand, but I would rather go the other way. I would rather run this engine with too small of a carburetor than too big of one, because at least with a too small of a carburetor, all you're really doing at that point is limiting RPM. You're still probably able to draw the same amount of volume of air, or comparable or a little better than what it's normally seeing, and you'd still allow the systems to work properly. On this carburetor, we just weren't able to do that. So off this one comes, 650 is going back on. Maybe I'll put the 500 back on it. I'm not exactly sure. If you have any comments, please leave them down below. And yeah, I'm eager to hear what you say, but come with some data, come with some information other than I think you're wrong, because I've just showed you that it's right. This is too big of a carburetor for this engine. And then we're gonna put the 950 on here, see if it gets worse. We'll catch you guys on the next video. We'll see you.